Good to see you all again this week of November. Native American Heritage Month. Going to talk about this gentleman and his companions, Antonio Quipa and companions, the Martyrs of La Florida. La Florida is what the Spanish called Florida when they had control of it. It was part of the Spanish Empire. And this man, Anthony or Antonio Quipa, well, he's kind of like the representative for the whole group. There was a group of 86 individuals who were killed, who are considered the martyrs of La Florida, and he's kind of like their representative. So, Antonio Quipa and companions. He was born sometime in the 1680s, and he died in 1704. Which was part of the Spanish Empire, but it later became the state of Florida, so I'll accept that, according to my previous principle. And he's sometimes called, I'll mention this in a second. Anyways, he was born in northern Florida, the northern part of Florida. He was an Appalachian Indian, the Appalachee. His parents were Christians, so he was raised a Christian and baptized as a baby. And he grew up in one of the missions that had been established, Mission San Luis de Talimali, St. Louis of Talamali, which is modern day, or was in the modern day city of Tallahassee, Florida. And it was the largest Appalachian mission in Florida. I mean, we were familiar with the mission system from Juniper Serra and whatchamacallit. Who else was the mission? The Kateri Tekakwitha. And so, it was a common system. And so they all lived there, the Europeans and their converts or Indian converts. And it was the largest mission in Florida with around 8,000 Christian Native Americans living there. He's sometimes called Antonio Iniha Quipa, but Iniha is a title. It's not really a name. It comes from the Appalachian language, and Iniha was somebody who was second in charge to the chief of the tribe, so like a vice chief. And so he was an Iniha. He had some power, the dude had some power and respect, I guess. Quite an intelligent man, it seems. He was literate. He could speak and write, or he could read and write. And he could speak Spanish and Latin. He was a carpenter in the community, so he had a devotion to St. Joseph, the putative father of Jesus, his foster father, you might say, St. Joseph, but he was a carpenter. He was also a skilled musician. He liked to play the guitar and play the flute. He would make flutes, so whoever drew this picture of him, this icon, sacred image, has him holding a flute, okay? Which, he would use his flutes when he went out with the missionaries to other Indian tribes. He would play the flute, play music for the tribes. I guess, to kind of dispose them to the message of the missionaries, show them that they weren't fearful. You didn't have to be afraid of them or hostile. So he would do that through music. Now, right above Florida is the state of Georgia, yes? State of Georgia, yes, which at that time was being colonized by the British. In fact, it's named after a British king, King George II. King George II. So the British were in the area, and they would cross the border and attack into La Florida villages and stuff like that. And in 1704, they did. The British launched an attack on a local village, and Anthony and companions decided to go help defend the villagers against the British attack. And in the process, the British also decided to kill the whole group. The British killed their priest that went with them, and Anthony Quipa and his companions, which I guess makes them martyrs. I mean, was it for the faith? I'm not sure, but That's the argument they're making, that it was out of hatred for the fact that they were Catholic Indians and Catholic Spaniards, I guess. Anyways, they were hanged on crosses or on poles over fire. So the person who painted this shows this, the cross with fire at the bottom. So they're hanging to kill them, so they were slowly burned to death by hanging over this fire underneath the cross. And as Anthony was dying, over many hours, he was preaching the gospel, asking forgiveness on the people who were killing him, talking. And according to the story, apparently the mother of Christ, Mary, appeared to him at one point, where he saw a vision of the mother of Christ. All right, that's nice. 2015, the bishop of the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee, right, where the mission was, opened up the cause for the canonization of Antonio Cuipa, and his companions. So they are now servant of God, Antonio Cuipa and his companions, 86 of them. I ask for all of your prayers for us who are blessed to live in this land which your ancestors settled so long ago, so many thousands and tens of thousands of years ago. And please bless the Appalachian Indians who are still around. Let's hope. And all the Native Americans in this beautiful country. Amen. In writing. Dooby dooby doo, dooby dooby doo. Don't need that. Need that. Need that. Need that. Where am I here? Religion and violence. Back to this. Slideshow. Okay. All right. So we're talking about Rene Girard. And the question is religion. I guess I'll come back to that. Mises. I stopped off at scapegoat. I started talking about scapegoat, and we were reading from Leviticus chapter 16. Yes. And a number of you, it's longish, describing Yom Kippur. Yes, I told you it's describing the day of Yom Kippur, which Jews still celebrate without the sacrifices, of course, but because they have no temple. But the Day of Atonement, or making reparation for one's sins throughout the year, one's imperfections. Where am I? What am I talking about? Turn the page, talking done. Okay. Anyways. And in the process of reading that text, okay, it talks about, well, there seem to be two practices going on. One practice, there's this sacrifice, but then there's this other practice, sacrifice of an animal, but then there's this other practice where the people are supposed to take like a goat out to, someplace, and they're supposed to draw a lot, or take a couple of goats out to someplace and draw lots, like draw straws for which goat should be chosen. And whichever, I guess, goat gets the shortest straw, that goat, you place your hand on the goat, and then you send it out into the wilderness, I guess, to die, to starve, or to die of thirst, I guess. But, I think the idea is to take the sins away from the community, out of the community, I think is what's going on. At least that's the interpretation I've heard of the ceremony. And, yeah. Here we go. We just have this at hand. So if I want to look at it, I get that. Okay. Can you see that? Is it readable in the back? Can you see, Ms. Park? Can you see the text? You can read it? Okay. All right. Yeah, taking 2 male goats and setting them before the Lord at the tent of meeting. I said outside the town, but I'm sorry. The tent of meeting, the place of worship. And then you cast lots, basically draw straws to determine which one belongs to God and which one belongs to Azazel. Okay, and then Azazel, you send the goat out to Azazel in the desert. All right, now, what is this referring to? What's going on here? Who is this Azazel? What do we think? Whoops, wrong mouse. Actually, let me. Well, we're not quite sure what the term means. There are some theories, but we're not quite sure what the word means. Azazel is the Hebrew, okay, and in the Bible translation I showed you, they preferred to just simply leave it, just to transliterate the word Azazel. But in other Bible translations, they might translate it as scapegoat. In some older translations, where we get the word scapegoat, we get the word scapegoat in English. And it's not, what does it mean? It's a Hebrew word, but as you can see on the PowerPoint, actually, as you can see on the PowerPoint, what does it mean? In Hebrew, it could be a combination of two words. Well, I give you the God first. I'll give you Aziz first, so then I'll get to the Hebrew. It could refer to a local god in the belief system of Canaan, which is what ancient Palestine was called. It's the land of Canaan. So you have Canaanite religion, and one of the gods was named Aziz. Similar, Aziz. He was a god of the planet Venus, the morning star. When you see the first star in the morning, the first star you can see, they call it in the morning time as the sun starts to come up. They call it the morning star. And also they have the evening star when the sun is setting. I guess it's the same star. I think it is. But anyways, that's wrong. It's not a star, Mr. Henry. It's actually a planet. It's not a star at all. Stars are stationary. Planets move in the sky. So it's the planet Venus. Venus, okay? So this planet of Venus, or the star, the morning star, was associated with this god Aziz. Okay. And, it's similar to Azazel. Is it a form of the name Aziz? Is it referring to two different gods? The God of Israel, the Lord, and then, so one goat goes to God and the other goat goes to Aziz, the local Canaanite god. Some people postulate that. Others postulate that the word is a combination of two Hebrew words, etz, which means a goat, especially a female goat, a she-goat, etz, and the verb adzal, which means to go away or get rid of something. Get rid of something, adzal. So it could be also given the vowels etzozel, the goat that is sent away. The goat that is sent away. All right. So the goat that belongs to God, and then the goat that's going to be sent away out into the desert. And that seems how ancient translations interpreted the Hebrew, okay, both Jewish and Christian. Okay, so because we have an ancient translation into Greek by Jews before the time of Jesus, and they use the word apopompaios. Apo means away from something. Pempo means to send or to throw out or cast away. So the thing that is thrown away or sent out, cast out, okay, apopompaios is how the word Azazel was translated by Jews into Greek. So that gives you an indication of how they understood it. They didn't understand it as the name of some god. They seem to have understood it as Azazel, or the combination of two words. In Latin, it's caper emissarius. Caper means goat in Latin. And emissary, to be sent out. An emissary, someone who's sent out. Emissarius. So a sent out goat, or the goat that is sent away. The goat that escapes, gets away from you. It gets away. And that's how it comes into, this interpretation comes into English. We just drop the E, so it becomes scapegoat, where really it's escape goat, the goat that gets away, okay? And this word scapegoat comes to us, it's traceable to 1530 and the English translation of the Bible done by this gentleman, William Tyndale. And that might be a pretty accurate picture of what he did look like, because it wasn't done that long after he lived. But I can't vouch that that's what he looked like. That could be just what someone thought he looked like. But nevertheless, it's a picture of William Tyndale, who did one of the first modern English translations. There were English translations before that. Okay, he wasn't unique in translating the Bible into English or into any other or any vernacular languages. It was dangerous though, because the church didn't want them. They said, they didn't want the Bible translated because they knew the contents. They knew the contents of the Bible kind of needed interpretation in some cases. Some of the stories are somewhat dicey in the Bible. So the church leaders had read the Bible, and so they kind of knew that this could be a problem if you just let people willy-nilly read the Bible on their own without any instruction. So don't translate it into the language people can understand. Leave it in Latin or study in the original languages, Greek or Hebrew and stuff like that. So what he was doing was actually, dangerous, and it got him killed. It got him on notice that he was a troublemaker, and eventually got him killed as a heretic, a wrong believer. Nevertheless, that's where the word scapegoat comes from, his translation. Oh, that picture that came down, I should have mentioned that. That's just a picture that archaeologists have dug up, and they believe it's of Aziz. It looks like he's riding a camel, I think. Looks kind of like a camel to me. So he's on a camel. Does he have a shield? Is he holding up a shield or something? Anyways, so if you want to know what people thought Aziz looked like, there he is. Later Jewish tradition, however, interpreted the name Azazel, again, kind of came back where we started. Not the god Aziz, but they interpreted the Azazel as a name, but for a demon, for an evil spirit. Because there's this traditional belief that evil spirits kind of hang out in deserts and wilderness places. So the desert, so you never went out into the desert alone. It was a scary place, to be, because that's where the demons were hiding out. Okay. That's what people believe. So, later Jews interpreted Azazel to be the name of this demon spirit in the desert, which is why they sent, whatever lot came up, choosing the goat for Azazel to be given to Azazel, the demon, was sent out into the desert where typically the demons were. Okay, that's another possible translation, or understanding of what's going on. But the long and the short is we don't know. We don't know what this word Azazel really means. We can only get theories. So we don't actually know what it's referring to. The lots are drawn, and one of the goats goes to the Lord, and one of the goats goes to something called an Azazel, which could be referring to the goat itself, but it could be referring to the name of something that we don't know about. So it's a puzzle. But the idea is that whichever goat is chosen for this Azazel is then, you lay hands on it, which seems to transfer the guilt of the community onto the animal, and then the animal with that guilt is sent away into the desert to die. So here we go. We go down. Here's the scapegoat. All right. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Verse 21. Laying both hands on the goat's head. Okay. This is Aaron, right? Is this still Aaron or the priest? Yeah. Looks like it's Aaron the priest. The priest lays hands on his head. He shall confess over it all the injustices of the Israelites and their trespasses, including all their sins. All right. Doesn't that include Ms. Duran? Trespasses and sins, the same. Are there trespasses that aren't sins? All right. Anyways, all right. I mentioned it. And so put them on the goat's head. He shall then have the goat led into the wilderness by an attendant, and the goat will carry off all the injustices to an isolated region. Okay? And then Aaron has to go purify himself and stuff like that. Also, the attendant when he comes back from having sent out the goat, the scapegoat. Okay, so that's what Girard is talking about in his theory of scapegoating. That's what he's getting at in his theory of scapegoating. All right, what's its connection? What's its connection to mimesis, though? I'm not completely sure. Okay, because remember, his idea is mimesis, the triangle. There's the object of desire. There's the person who wants it, but there's another person involved who sees the desire of the other person desiring the object, and you imitate that desire by wanting it too, yes? But there's a conflict because why is there a conflict? Because there's only one object of desire in the triangle, okay? So there has to be a conflict between the two who are desiring because they both can't possess it together. Well, that's an assumption. Maybe they could, but anyways, that's. If this were a class on Rene Girard, I'd get deeper into that. But okay, let's just go with it, okay? They can't both possess it, so there's a conflict. And so that's part of it. I think the scapegoat is a distinct part of his theory as well. I'm not sure exactly how it completely ties in with mimesis. But I guess it's with the crowd and the mob. He talks about the mob needs a scapegoat. The mob of people needs something to transfer their sins to, their imperfections, their inadequacies. And so in a mob, it's mimetic because everyone's imitating everybody else. It's kind of like what a mob is, you know? You see, you're in a group of people, and it could be a protest, but then some people might start smashing some windows, throwing some firecrackers, and suddenly you're not a bunch of protesters anymore. You're a mob. Maybe. Because people start imitating the activity, the violent activity, mimetic, mimesis, imitation. And the mob does bad things. So how does the mob absolve itself of its violent activity? Okay, of its bad things that the people in the mob have done. You find a scapegoat. You have to. Because the mob can't deal with the fact. The mob can't deal with the fact that they've done a certain thing, now committed a certain outrage. So you find someone to blame or something to blame. You transfer all your guilt onto the scapegoat. And you kill the scapegoat instead of yourselves. Punish the scapegoat instead of yourself. See how it's working? Scapegoat gets punished. But you think, according to his idea, the people really think the scapegoat is guilty. The people think the scapegoat is real guilty, okay? It's like, I put up a picture of David. What's his first name? Is it Brad Dable? Ryan, thank you. Of the Giants, the coach of the Giants. But this happens in all sports. I like to watch soccer. Fire soccer coaches get fired and sacked. And he got fired. And okay, you say, was he a scapegoat or not? Okay, that's a question. Was he a scapegoat for the team? Because ultimately the coaches are never on the field playing. It's the players who are playing. And if players suck, players stink. And they're not doing their jobs. Laziness or incompetence or just mistakes, accidents, stuff like that. How does the coach have any control over that? The coach makes up the play, the program, or the program, and what's the word I was going to look for? It's not coming to me. Anyways, but you know what I'm talking about. And the coach decides how things are going to go with the plays and what plays we're going to call or how we're going to organize ourselves on the field. Okay, the coach is there during the week with the training sessions and the practices, trying to, look for any problems and watching tape of other teams or video of the other team you're going to play to see look for weaknesses, be prepared, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. If the coach doesn't do any of that or doesn't do it well, the team's unprepared, fine. But ultimately, even if you're well prepared, you have just no control of what happens on the field sometimes. And if it happens enough, people don't usually blame. People might be angry with the players, but it's not going to fire. They don't usually fire the players, right? No one fires the players. Ever seen where, the Giants defense sucks. They gave up the game again. What was it playing at? Well, it doesn't matter. Their defense stinks. So can you fire people? Cut them from the team? Well, they all have contracts. But you can't fire the coaches, fire the offensive coordinator, fire the head coach, get rid of them. That seems to be pretty easy. Doesn't seem to be pretty easy to fire, a strong safety, or a linebacker. They just bounce from team to team. But the coach is like, out, you're out during the season. Is it scapegoating? I just use that as an example, okay? He's a bad coach, so the scapegoat is believed to be guilty, and hence deserving of whatever happens to the scapegoat, okay? What does he say about Christianity, though? He makes this somewhat, if you read the chapter by Diane Fozard Weaver about religion and violence, and she talks about Girard's idea. She mentions that this is kind of a controversial aspect or development of Girard's idea of the scapegoat and the mob. What is different about Christianity, according to Girard? What did he say? How does the scapegoat function in the story of Jesus and the mob? Do you remember? You remember what he says about Christianity and the scapegoat? Jesus the scapegoat? How Jesus is different as a scapegoat? Mr. Lynch. Remember? Well, what Rene Girard says in his idea about scapegoating, he talks about how the process works. The mob wants to kill the scapegoat. The scapegoat is guilty. Okay, so they can place all their injustices, their guilt on the scapegoat. They really believe the scapegoat is to blame. Not us. The mob isn't to blame. Scapegoat's to blame, so we can kill the scapegoat. But Christianity kind of turns that on its head, according to Girard. Turns that whole idea around. How? Mr. Clinch. What do you think, Mr. Clinch? No idea? No idea. Mr. Moon! No? Gotta find somebody who, I'm assuming you were listening to it when we listened to it. If you don't remember it, you might want to listen to it again.
You talked about the unmasking of the scapegoat and how Jesus is the ultimate scapegoat and how it shows that the possibility of the rupture because God is identifying with the victim and not the now
Who's the victim?
Jesus. because he's getting killed.
The scapegoat, yeah. The scapegoat's the victim. Is he guilty?
No.
Nah! Mr. Dobson. Yes. Okay. Anyways, yeah, in the case of Christianity, it's the scapegoat who's innocent and the mob is guilty. The mob is wrong. It turns it around and puts the blame where the blame is supposed to be. The mob thinks, oh, we're right, the scapegoat is guilty. They don't look at their own sins, but turns around and says, no, in this case, Jesus of Nazareth is totally innocent. And not just in the Gospels, in the story of Jesus, but I think he says the whole Bible is about God identifying with the victims, the victimized, the victims of the mob, not with the mob. The hell with what the mob says. God's judgment is that this person is innocent. So it turns scapegoating on its head. It's controversial, I don't know why. It's controversial. It makes Christianity look good. So I guess I'm supposed to like it because I'm a Christian. I don't know, because I told you in the last class, I'm not sure if I am down with all of his theory of idea of mimetic theory. Where's the proof? He's an academic, and he says that out. He says I'm an intellectual, so he's not. He's not like needs to. It doesn't mean he doesn't need to demonstrate it. But he's a thinker. He's an intellectual. These are ideas he's thinking about. He's not an anthropologist or a psychologist or somebody else who might try to test the idea and see if it's true. It's more of experiential. We experience it. If you read enough mythology, I guess, then you read the Gospels, you might say, yeah, Girard is right. And all the mythologies, the myths, the human myths, the pagan myths, yes, when the mob, like with Oedipus, he brings up Oedipus, right? He talked about Oedipus, the king Oedipus. Oedipus kills his father and sleeps with his mother and brings a plague on the city of Thebes. So the mob decides he has to be exiled. He's the scapegoat for the plague, okay? It doesn't really work for me because Oedipus admits that he did these things and that he was wrong to do them. I told you that in the last class. He gouges his eyes out. He punishes himself. He knows he's guilty. So I don't know how that example really works for Girard or that it works really well. But it is something, interesting for our purposes as we talk about religion and violence. Because religion or violence is part of that triangle of object of desire and then the two desirers, okay? And there's nothing necessarily religious about it. He does bring in religion when he talks about Christianity and Christ as as you said, Ms. Rogers, the ultimate scapegoat, the scapegoat who's innocent, and the mob is guilty. But it offers an idea or a theory of why there is violence. And then maybe how religion can get caught up in that, okay? All right, well, to give you an example, like if you have an object of desire, God, and you see other people desire God and you want God as well, but you want God for yourself. You don't want to share God. So you can come into conflict. So your conception of God is not as true as mine. I have a truer love or a truer understanding of God than you. So now there's conflict and maybe violence. I want to prove to my object of desire how much I love it, in this case, God. I'll show God how much better I am in desiring him than the other person, my competitor. Okay, so if my competitor does this, I'll do that. Mimesis, yes? Here's where the mimetic idea comes in. If my competitor, fasts from food a lot, doesn't eat food or drink a lot to show his devotion to his God, I'll do the same thing, but I'll do it longer than he can. I'll outdo him in fasting. Or if he prays a lot, I'll pray more. Okay, mimesis, I'm imitating him, but I'm trying to outdo it as well. So is religion violent? No! No. Okay, I'll start out making the argument that no, it's not violent. Which, of course, you might assume I would make because I'm a religious person. You might assume that I don't want religion to be violent. Although you might be wrong. Maybe I'm a violent person and I don't mind a violent religion. Maybe I like a violent religion. No, I'm a Christian, so I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. So there is no. Is religion violent? I would say no, I would argue no first because there is nothing in the concept to indicate violence. And you can say, well, Dr. Dunn, but you gave the definition. You're defining the concept. So you didn't put violence in the concept. Well, no, but even if regular Twix or special, nuggets regular, very nice. No, I mean, even people who might be against religion that I've read about or, heard talk about it, they say religion is violent, and they think religion is violent, but for a definition, when they define what religion is, get to that point, they don't seem to include violence as part of the definition. So I'm not aware of it. Maybe there's someone who could, I guess, assert a violent definition of religion. Religion is a form of violence. Doesn't sound right, does it? Religion is a form of violence? The belief system. That sounds closer to what it is. Belief system that engenders violence? It does. We looked at the etymology of the word religion way back when. Talked about religio, that's what the Romans called it. Something that binds people together is one of the meanings of the word. Okay, there are other interpretations of what it might be, but binding people together sounds kind of positive, right? It doesn't sound violent necessarily. Creating community, creating connections. It's kind of like LinkedIn. You don't equate LinkedIn with Fight Club. How's it going? Okay, I can say this. Yes. All right. So, I mean, just from looking at the word religion or even the definition, okay, religion deals with ultimate existence and meaning, ultimate reality. Nowhere, and it's not just because I don't want religion to be violent. I know it is. And I will argue later that yes, religion is violent. But here, when I'm saying no, just the concept doesn't seem to indicate violence. Even the presence of religion doesn't usually indicate violence. I mean, what comes into your mind when I say, like church, synagogue, temple, shrine? For me, it's different for you, obviously, but for me, usually, and again, this could just be my bias, I guess, but typically it seems like people associate those words with like quiet. It's a place of quiet, of peacefulness or calmness. People go there to maybe meditate or pray, think, place of peacefulness. You're not expecting to go into a church and find a gun rack. Well, maybe in Louisiana, but or Tennessee, yeah. No, but it would be weird. At least that would be my reaction to go into a mosque and see, like a bunch of flamethrowers in the corner. And in fact, you can't enter a mosque with a weapon at all. Cannot enter a mosque with a weapon. It used to be you couldn't enter churches either, but now it's like There are no rules, at least the Catholic Church. But yeah, so if the cops have to go into a mosque, they're supposed to, they should remove their weapons before they go in if they need to arrest somebody who's in the mosque. Otherwise, problems. Because they're not supposed to be a place. It's not supposed to be a place of violence. It's a place of peace. And maybe the churches are just calm and quiet. Maybe I just associated with like nobody's there. It's the best place to study, the chapel, right? I highly recommend it. If you need a place, this quiet place to do your work. It's always warm in the wintertime. It's cool in the summertime. And put up with Jesus being there. Not going to be disturbed. So even my conception of, concrete, forget about the concept of religion. Let's think concrete. I think of religious stuff. I don't usually associate it with, people brawling, having fights, maybe an Eagles game you do. They still have the courtroom at the Eagles Stadium. And they still have that courtroom to adjudicate people who are arrested during the game. Did they get rid of that? Yeah, about 15 years ago they did that. It was in the news. For so many people were getting arrested at the Eagles games that a judge, to arraign people who were arrested at the games, right there on the spot in the stadium. They had some room in the stadium where security would take people, the cops would take them. Or soccer. I love soccer, but if you're watching these soccer, well, not here in the United States, but in foreign countries like England, also years in Europe. Why do they have police all over the place? The police come out, they're all surrounding the field, basically to keep the fans off the field, but also to keep the fans from one team against from the fans of the opposing teams, so they don't beat each other up. But no, when I go into a church, I don't expect that to happen. I don't expect, to be entering the octagon, Speaking of that, what was that guy, Dylan Dennis? What was he doing? Starting fights, just punching people in the crowd, and they wouldn't let him fight in the competitions. So, even in the actuality of a religious presence or place, you expect the opposite of violence, I think. Peacefulness, calmness, no pain or injury. Even when you meet religious people, you see a priest, you don't think he's like Conor McGregor. Or although you did have that movie, Father Stu, a few years ago, they had that movie Father Stu with Mark Wahlberg. I guess he was a former boxer or something. Anyway. But you're not expecting, the priest to be a violent person, or the imam, or the rabbi. You'd think that was kind of out of character, wouldn't you? A violent rabbi? I don't know. However, there are some times that religion does seem to prescribe violent activities. Circumcision. You're actually cutting off the skin of the person's body. Okay? And temple sacrifice. Leviticus 16, Part of the thing that was described in Leviticus 16 was the sacrifice of an animal to God. You cut its throat or do whatever, you dismember it and you burn it. That's violent. You find sacrifice in other religions. Hinduism, people used to sacrifice animals, not really anymore. But you do sacrifice things. You burn up flowers or stuff that you offer to the god or the goddess. You destroy them by fire. Okay, that's violent. Certainly to the flower. Um, you know, you have whipping. People whip themselves. There we go. Hold on a second. Oh, wait a second. I didn't put that on. It's on one of my PowerPoints. Maybe not on this one. Whoops. Yes. No. Okay, it's on another PowerPoint. Let me see if. Let me go to that. Does religion have to be violent? Yes, I think it's on here. There we go. Here are these dudes. Muharram. Got that correct? Yes. Muharram, the month of Muharram. Okay? In Shiite Muslim countries or places where you have a lot of Shiites, they remember the martyrdom of these two guys, Hussein and Hassan, and who were killed by other Muslim armies. And if you take world religions with me next semester, I talk about that when I talk about Islam, because it's one of those defining moments for at least Shiite Islam, which is one of the branches. It's only about 10 to 15% of worldwide Islam is Shia or Shiite. But this is one of the defining moments, the killing of these two guys, Hussein and Hassan. And during the month of Muharram in the Islamic calendar, to mourn the death of these two guys who were so important to them, people will go out, they'll smack themselves on the head, beat themselves on the head bloody until they bleed. But if you really want to show how devoted you are about your sorrow, you know, you've got these metal chains with spikes on them, and you just whip yourself silly, whip your back, or you see the blood all over the place, so it's all bloody. Men will do this. You take your shirt off and you whip yourself, hopefully not to death, but you whip yourself pretty bad. Notice not everybody's doing it, only those who are really into it, really mourning Hussein and Hassan. That seems violent to me. Pretty violent. Buddhism is violent, has violent moments. For example, in some forms of Buddhism, like Tibetan Buddhism, whoops, hold on a second. Yeah. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's custom to cut up the ritualistic cutting up of the corpse, cutting up of the body of a dead person. You know, they'll haul the dead body out to the countryside, you know, and just dismember it, cut it into pieces so that the birds, the ravens, the carrion feeders, vultures can come and feed off of it and eat it up. And it's meant to show that nothing is the impermanence of reality, that nothing is really, everything's changeable. Nothing is really a unity in a way, even the human person. But that's kind of violent. You know, you're physically cutting up a corpse, human body. So yeah, I mean, there are practices that seem that people are supposed to do or do that are violent. But these activities, I think, are meant to bring the person into contact with the ultimate. Okay, they are violent, but they're not violent for violence, the sake of violence. Okay, it's purposeful. It's not condoning violence per se, not condoning violence against oneself or against another person. You could only do it in these circumstances. So it's boundaried, as they say. Okay? Because in these circumstances, it's kind of good because it will bring you into contact with ultimate reality. But otherwise, it can get out of control and it become profane. And remember, that's what the word violence actually means. Violo in Latin means to profane, to treat it not like it's sacred. So if it's sacred, it's no longer violence, technically. If you're doing it for this religious purpose, it's something else. It's not simple violence. It's not going up, taking those whips and going up and just whipping someone bloody on the street because you're angry or something, or you want to rob them or whatever. That's simple violence. That's not sacred at all. But if you're doing it because you are mourning the killing of these two men, Hussein and Hassan, it's not really violence anymore in that context because it's sacred. It's not a profanity. All right. Well, no. All right. But what about yes? Is religion violent? Yes, it is. Yeah, it is violent. Because I've just been talking, Ms. Krauss, about the concept, right? Conceptually. I'm not talking practically, how something actually is. I'm talking theoretically. In theory, religion, the concept does not indicate violence in the concept. In fact, I would argue, because as I talked with Violo, it would indicate the opposite, because religion deals with the sacred, not the profane. Violence is to profane something. However, when we move on from the concept to reality, religion is anthropological. It has to do with us, anthropoi, human beings, the human species. Religion comes from us. Remember the definition, okay? Beliefs are practices by which human beings interact. Yes, Ms. Colonna? Religion's a human thing, right? Huh? All right. At least that's what my definition says, okay? It's a human creation. It's what we use to promote contact with the sacred, which is our doorway to ultimate reality. That's how I defined it, or just did it back when I spoke ad nauseum about what is religion. Right, Mr. Bracy? I lost it, eh, Mr. Bracy? Mr. Bracy. Religion comes from humans. It is not something that exists in a far-off conceptual world, okay? So you have to take that into account. Religion includes, in fact, it requires human beings to exist. There's no religion without human beings. Someone has to believe it. Someone has to practice it. We write the text, the sacred scriptures. We come up with the practices. We outline the beliefs. I mean, there's no concept of religion just hovering somewhere and then just comes down. You're like, oh, yes, okay. All right. So this is what we believe and what we do. Oh, didn't think of that before. Okay, let's get to it. Got work to do, Mr. Gaines. Didn't see you come in. Mr. Ms. Lazarus, feeling like a comedian on the bar. And it's like 12:30 a.m. in the morning, They're about to turn the lights on and call last call. Still got 5 minutes left in my set. So, human beings bring their violence to the concept. So yes, religion can be violence. It is violent because we bring our violence to the concept. So yeah, religion can be very, really violent. As long as Ms. Cook, Ms. Colombo, Mr. Rudden, as long as Mr. Saunders, there's us. When we're involved, there seems to be that potentiality for violence because we are. We're fearful of the other. We fear otherness, what's not like us. We're also fascinated by it, but we also kind of can be scared of it. And difference is weird. It's threatening. It's uncomfortable. Can be, I should say. And for humans, your group, your tribe, your clan, whatever word you want to use, is to be honored and you treat them favorably. But others, the outsiders, okay, they're not part of your tribe. No, you don't see them as just, oh, well, they're other human beings with human dignity. No, that's not, at least that's not, doesn't seem how human beings have operated for most of our history. You treat them suspiciously as a threat. First, you analyze the threat. And then if they're not threatening, you can, well, maybe not welcome them, but at least not worry about them. That's usually in tribal cultures. But then you have some cultures like the Middle East and stuff, the idea of hospitality, where the outsider, the foreigner, the the traveler, that's not the word, the stranger, I guess you would say, the stranger, is to be treated with respect and honored. But some might argue that that's because of the influence of religious ideals like Islam. That God made all of us and we're made in the image and likeness of God. And that's why you treat the stranger in that way. You feed him. You take care of his or her needs. But it also has cultural and practical things like, you need that because, back in the old days, 1,000 years ago or whatever, when you're traveling around, there were no rest stops. There was no, place every 5 miles or 10 miles with a McDonald's and a bunch of bathrooms that you could take a rest and, take care of your business. There weren't a lot of villages or towns along the way with stores and gas stations. So everyone had to kind of help everyone else if you wanted to be helped yourself. So, hospitality. But in other cultures, especially tribal cultures, which are quite ancient, no, the other has to be first suspected. So, for example, as I was in Papua New Guinea, the idea of the man house, a separate building within the community, where if a stranger came in, they didn't sit him down and feed him and give him a cup of tea, stuff like maybe if you were in Lebanon, oh, you're not from here, yeah, come on, I'll cook for you, make some hot tea, black. Nice, meet my children. No. Hospitality. Different mindset. Which might be because of their religion, the influence of religion over the culture. But in a tribal society in Papua New Guinea, no, some stranger comes in, not of your clan, your tribe. First thing you do is you put them in that building, the man house. The house for a person. Put them in that building, which is it does protect the person, but it also protects the community because the person can't leave until you basically figure out what their situation is. What's the situation? Is this person okay, or does this person mean harm, or whatever? Then you can, welcome them and treat them. But first, you have to be careful. If one assumes, that's where I got, no. If one assumes that religion comes primarily from us, from humans, as I've said, it's a human creation. Now, if we assume that it comes from us, then the question of, religion and violence is actually, easier to answer because, yeah, religion is violent because we are violent. If it's part of the human condition, just I mentioned sports before, soccer riots, soccer hooliganism, people have fights at hockey games and football games and sporting events. What's the matter? The outside more interesting than me?
Looking stuff. So I can't thought that's like heavy snow.
No, I think it's the alien invasion is starting. It's maybe, come on, Mr.
just joking.
It's Bigfoot tapping on the window, Mr. Reynolds.
That would be pretty cool.
You think so?
Yeah.
Depends on whether Bigfoot is friendly or not, right?
Well, it's outside.
Yeah. True. So yeah, I mean, politics is violent and seems to be getting somewhat more violent. Let's hope it's just a fad and not a trend. But I mean, President Trump wasn't the first person that someone has tried to kill. People tried when I was growing up. I remember when Ronald Reagan, someone tried to kill him, shot him. Of course, famous one is John F. Kennedy, who was killed. But McKinley was killed as well, was assassinated by an anarchist, I think. And who was the guy who was shot, but he didn't die, but he died from the treatment of the doctors? Was that Van Buren? Not Van Buren. Is that Van Buren? Anyway, there's another president who was also, someone tried to kill him. And as they said, it was the doctors who killed him, not the assassin. Because the medical technology was so terrible, they kept with unsanitized hands, because they didn't believe in washing their hands back then. So, they didn't know much. They didn't know a lot of germ theory. They had their ideas. So they were digging around in the gunshot wound, trying to find the bullet. They couldn't, but digging, causing tremendous infection, which eventually killed him. I think it was Van Buren, but I could be wrong about that. Abraham Lincoln, of course, got him. He was killed. And then, you have other politicians, politicians have beaten each other. They've had fights in the Senate. If you read the history of like the Congress and stuff, they've had altercations. And so there's been political violence. So sports, politics, seems, like just about anything can become violent. A party can become violent. Someone's having a house party and people we're all dancing or standing around having a good time, and then people start fighting for some reason. Or people show up to fight, let us in, or we're going to start, throwing punches, or worse, let us into your party. So, I mean, I don't know that religion is necessarily unique in human activities if when you have us involved. And so religion is more representative of the violence, I would argue, that's apparent in human nature and in our relationships, and as anything else can become a tool for violence. You can start appealing to it, using it to stir people up, See, they don't believe in God, they're evil people, What are we going to do about them? What do you think we should do about them? Oh, they got to get out of here. We don't want them in our community. Yeah, but they're not going to leave on their own. What do you think God would want us to do about them? These people who don't believe in him. Insult God by not believing in him. How are we going to get them out? They're not going to leave peacefully. Ooh. All right. One thing's leading to another, All right. So it could be used as a tool for violence, but then you can just change the dynamic by changing the language. Instead of talking about, well, they don't believe in God or something, you used to be like, well, they don't get their kids vaccinated. They don't believe in vaccines, They're going to get all our kids sick. And what if our kid dies from measles or German mumps or something? They don't care. What are we going to do with these people? They can't live here anymore. Get them out of the... Well, they're not going to leave the town willingly. Well, they're not going to kill my kid. So just change the dynamic. One example, I used religion as a tool but other things can become tools as well. So it's not really a problem to answer, Yeah, of course religion's violent because human beings are involved. We're involved. And we're violent. Okay, we do violent stuff. However, where it becomes a problem and less easy to answer, it becomes harder to answer, is if you believe that religion comes from a supernatural source. That adds a whole bunch of complexity to it. Because then you can't, at least if I say it comes from humans, I can kind of distance religion from violence. Because I say, well, humans are violent. Religion itself isn't violent, right, Mr. Dobson? I can kind of keep that distance. religion is just religion, and then humans can use it as a tool for violence. But if you believe that religion is supernatural, you can't really distance religion from violence. Miss Krause. Because, Miss Park, then the violent tendencies aren't just coming from humans, but from the supernatural source. If you're like a Jew or a Christian and believe, well, the Bible says that human beings, male and female, are created in the image and likeness of God. Well, the humans are violent. So did they get that from God then? So God is violent? The ultimate source of our violence is the supernatural, from our supernatural source? See, it becomes a little bit messier question to deal with, The first one, you take the paper towel and it's easy to wipe up, right?
Like violence, like free will, not.
Okay. All right, what do you think about that? You don't know? No thoughts? No?
Maybe we have to end like the rebellion against God because of our free will.
Okay. Maybe there's a rebellion. God is nonviolent, but so there's again, it comes back to us. We're to blame. Okay. Yeah, that solution, you find that in certain religions, original sin. Adam and Eve, the first humans, disobey God. And that's when in the Bible violence enters the world, not before. Okay, yeah. But do we want to let God or the gods so easily off the hook? Or just throw another thing into the pot, bouillabaisse. Maybe that's why you find in religions they're so often emphasizing, don't kill, or the golden rule. Don't do anything that to another person that you would find harmful to yourself. But then again, those statements about nonviolence or not harming are oftentimes entwined with a whole bunch of other statements where people are kind of told to harm other people, right? Sometimes. So which one do you want to say is from the God and which one is from the human? Okay. Anyway, I don't have an answer. I just think it makes the question, it makes it more complex answer if you throw a God into the picture. You say that the religion comes from a God, a supernatural source. There's further explanation needed of where violence is coming from. Maybe you can, as Ms. Rogers and Ms. Durant were saying, can blame it on human free will, can blame it on human rebellion. Okay, but you could also blame it on the God. Why would the God make human beings that way? Capable of choosing violence. Maybe it's true what I said at the beginning when discussing violence. Violence is just, when I was talking about what is violence way back when. What is violence? Violence seems to just be part of creation. Things break apart. Things destroy other things. Volcanoes. Typhoons. Exploding stars. These are all perfectly natural, Miss Krause, right? Maybe not likable. It's inconvenient. If you're living near a volcano and it erupts and your house is destroyed and you almost die, it's not a good thing, Ms. Durant, right? But you don't think like, wow, that's really odd that the volcano should erupt. That shouldn't happen. No, it's like, the earth is popping her pimples. You want the pressure to go away, you pop the pimple, get the goo out. Pus and clean it out. Takes away the pressure so it doesn't hurt anymore, right? That's what's going on with the earth. Pressure that builds up, Ms. Lazarus, under the crust. melted rock. And eventually, and it spurts up. Pimples popped. Mount Kilauea erupts. Perfectly natural. Physics. Yeah, what's wrong with that? So a few thousand people get fried. Some animals, plants. It's nature. Nature is violent. The world is violent. So maybe that's just part of the natural order of things. Violence is just part of creation. So maybe it's not surprising that even for gods or the supernatural world, violence is also a normal reality. Some religions accept that, like Hinduism, one of the most ancient religions. If you just take world religions with me, Ms. Colonna, next semester, hint, hint. Ms. Durand, wink, wink. And I talk about Hinduism, I go into this, the goddess Kali, she's a goddess, very violent creature. It's Hinduism kind of embraces the fact of violence. It's undeniable. So it's part of the religion. All right. I'll end here and finish on Thursday. Now we're talking Hector Avalos on Thursday. Yes. God bless you all. Thanks, sir. Cheers. Good-a-da-dee-da-da-da. La-da-da-doo. Good day, sir. Yes, sir. You're welcome, miss. Good day. So, Mr. Bracy, did I get anything out of you today?
So what?
Did I get anything out of you today?
Oh man, I was tired. So long.
Bracy. All right. 8. 8. Absent. Absent. Absent.